If someone had told Claire that her life would change because of a $4 cup of coffee and a flickering neon sign, she would have laughed. But that night, under the dim glow of a small roadside diner, everything she thought she knew about love, status, and worth shattered into something far more real. The story begins on a rainy Friday evening in New York. Claire Morgan, 27, polished, confident, and recently promoted to marketing manager, was running late. Her phone buzzed nonstop from her group chat. "Girl, don't mess this one up. He's not like the others." But Claire couldn't shake the small irritation rising in her chest. Daniel, the man she'd met online a week earlier, had chosen a diner for their first date. Not a trendy rooftop bar. Not a candlelit bistro. A diner. She looked out of her Uber window at the neon sign flashing Miller's Diner, open 24 hours inside. "He couldn't even pick someplace decent," she murmured, clutching her beige coat tighter. When she walked in, the place smelled of fried bacon, old coffee, and nostalgia. The booths were torn at the edges, the floor squeaked, and the waitress looked like she'd been there since the 80s. And there he was, Daniel. He stood up the moment he saw her. Clean white shirt, worn-out jeans, messy dark hair, a smile that was awkward but genuine. Not the kind of man who'd impress at first glance. But there was something steady in his eyes, something that made Claire pause before putting on her polite corporate smile. "Hey, Claire. You made it," he said warmly. "Yeah, traffic was crazy," she replied, sliding into the booth. He laughed softly. "You're lucky you made it before the rush hour pie crowd." Rush hour pie crowd. She blinked. Was he joking? But he wasn't. He seemed perfectly comfortable in this tiny, dim place. Daniel handed her the menu, laminated and cracked at the corners. "They make the best pancakes here. You should try them." She forced a smile. "It's 7 p.m. They serve breakfast all day," he said with a grin that almost made her smile for real. As they ordered, she noticed the way he spoke to the waitress, kindly, by name. "Thanks, Lucy," he said, when she poured him another cup of coffee. Claire glanced up, surprised. Most people ignored servers entirely, but Daniel spoke to her like she mattered. "So," she said after a while, "what do you do?" "I'm an architect," he said simply. "Mostly small projects. Community housing, schools, stuff like that." "Oh," she replied, expecting something fancier. "So not big city buildings, or anything?" He smiled. "Not yet. I'm more focused on designing places people can actually afford to live in." Something about the way he said afford made her uncomfortable. She stirred her coffee, realizing she had judged him before even knowing him. The conversation flowed surprisingly easily after that. He was funny, humble, but sharp. When she mentioned her corporate office life, he didn't seem intimidated or impressed. Instead, he asked real questions. "Do you actually like what you do? And what made you choose marketing?" Questions no one ever asked her. Halfway through their meal, an elderly man stumbled in, dripping from the rain. His hands trembled as he fumbled for his wallet. The waitress looked worried. "Mr. Peterson, you're short again," she said softly. The old man sighed, his shoulders heavy. "I'll pay you next week, Lucy. I swear." Daniel stood up before Claire even processed what was happening. He walked over and quietly placed a $10 bill on the counter. "Cover it," he said, nodding at Lucy. The waitress smiled. "You're a good one, Danny." "Danny?" Claire blinked. So he was a regular here. He came back and sat down like nothing had happened. "Do you know him?" she asked. Daniel shrugged. "Yeah. He's a retired bus driver. Lost his wife last year. Comes here every night. The least I can do is make sure he eats." Claire stared at him, her throat tight. For the first time that night, she didn't have anything clever to say. They talked for hours, about dreams, failures, fears, and little things like favorite movies and worst hairstyles. When the clock struck 11, the diner was nearly empty, and the rain had slowed to a soft drizzle outside. Daniel offered to walk her to her car. The city lights reflected in puddles, and for a moment, the air between them was quiet, but full of something unspoken. "I had a really good time," he said, "even if the pancakes weren't your thing." She laughed softly. "They weren't bad." He grinned. "Next time, I'll pick a place with a tablecloth." "Next time," she teased. "If you'll let there be one," he said, his eyes searching hers. There was something so sincere in that moment that Claire felt her heart soften in a way it hadn't in years. She nodded. I'd like that. Weeks turned into months. Their second date was a walk through Central Park. Their third was helping him paint a small community center he was renovating. Every time she saw him, she realized he lived differently, not chasing wealth or image, but meaning. She found herself craving that simplicity, but their worlds couldn't have been more different. Her friends mocked her quietly. You're seriously dating a guy who hangs out in diners? One had said. Another joked. Let me know when he designs a skyscraper. Claire laughed with them, but it stung. The real test came 6 months later when her company threw a grand corporate gala. She invited Daniel, hoping her friends would see what she saw in him. He showed up in a simple black suit, nothing designer, just neat. At the event, surrounded by people sipping champagne and talking stock prices, Daniel stood out. Not because he didn't belong, but because he didn't pretend. When one of her colleagues, Brian, made a smug joke, "So Daniel, which firm are you with? Or are you freelance?" Daniel smiled calmly. You could say that. I design homes for families who can't afford architects. The table fell quiet. Brian laughed awkwardly. So like charity work? Daniel didn't flinch. No, like community. People deserve good homes, even if they're not rich. Claire felt her chest tighten with pride and guilt. She had once judged him the same way. Later that night, after the gala ended, she found Daniel standing outside, looking at the city skyline. You okay? She asked. He nodded. Yeah, I'm used to not fitting in with that kind of crowd. I'm sorry, she whispered. They can be shallow. He looked at her for a long moment. Are you? The question hit her harder than she expected. I was, she admitted. Until I met you. He smiled softly. That's all I needed to hear. 2 years later, that same diner, Miller's Diner, was filled with people. The neon sign had been replaced, the booths reupholstered, the floor shining like new. A small sign near the door read, renovated by Morgan and Gray Designs. Yes, Morgan and Gray. Claire had quit her corporate job 6 months after that gala. She and Daniel had started a small firm together, designing affordable housing and public spaces. And on that special night, with Lucy the waitress wiping away tears of joy, Daniel knelt down beside the same booth where they'd first met. He opened a small velvet box. Claire Morgan, he said, voice trembling, will you marry me? Her eyes filled instantly. The whole diner went silent, waiting. Yes, she whispered, laughing through her tears. 1,000 times yes. The crowd erupted in applause. Lucy rang the little service bell like a wedding chime, and even old Mr. Peterson raised his cup of coffee with a shaky smile. Years later, when people asked Claire why they named their company Miller's Designs, she'd smile and say, because that's where everything real began, in a place no one thought was special. But deep down, she knew the truth. It wasn't about the diner. It was about the man who believed kindness mattered more than status, who showed her that love wasn't about how much you spend, but how much you give. And sometimes, the cheapest place on the map can hold the most priceless memories of your life. Never judge someone by where they take you, but by how they treat you. Because true love doesn't need luxury. It needs sincerity, respect, and heart.